Newspapers aren't what they used to be. No question there. The question is, what can and should newspapers be doing to survive? Are journalistic principles like fairness and accuracy irrelevant in the internet age, or more important than ever? And what might a future Orange County newspaper look like? Will it be a community effort? Part 2 of my talk with 3 longtime media people remaking their careers and impacting the local news scene right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with Memorial Care, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.
Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. I recently sat down with 3 media colleagues to discuss the past, the present, and the future of our local news business. Brian Calle, former editorial page editor of the Orange County Register, Gustavo Arellano, former editor and columnist for OC Weekly, and Tom Johnson, former publisher of the Daily Pilot in Newport Beach, Costa Mesa. So much for the past. Brian's now trying to save LA Weekly. Gustavo's freelancing with a part-time gig at the LA Times. And Tom Johnson is running a local online news service, StuNews Newport. That's the present. And the future? Well, we talked about that too, especially about patrons of journalism, wealthy citizens and community nonprofits that are emerging as saviors of local news. The show went fast and we kept talking. So here's more of our discussion. We pick up on the topic of media bias. Are journalists falling short, or have readers and viewers themselves become hyper-partisan?
I think people have been spoiled over the last 20 years, as the TV media sources have gotten bigger. People watch and listen and read what they want to read nowadays for their own opinions. So
confirmation bias.
Yeah, so if you're picking up the Register and you don't believe what they're writing about on their pages,
you'll go somewhere else.
You'll go someplace else. And if so it's different than it used to be, because you'd pick up a newspaper, you'd read their editorial page, but then you'd read their op-ed page, and you'd walk away with, this kind of, couple sides of coverage and stuff like now, and everybody seems so focused in on only what they're doing that I think it hurts a lot.
Yes, but again, I think that sometimes we should sit back and say, what are we doing? Yes, all right, so the audience has become more jaded, it has become more partisan, yes. But I do believe that there's still a great yearning out there, a certain number of people, hopefully enough that a nonprofit could sustain something, that want objective, fair reporting. And we should just concede our biases. What I'm saying is sometimes I think we use that as a crutch, that, oh, well, they're criticizing me because they're left or they're right, and we should just say, maybe they're criticizing me because I didn't do a very good job reporting that.
I don't think people care. They use biases as their excuse for not reading news, but if you do a story, or you do stories that people are going to read, they're going to read it just to hate it. OC Weekly, how many people, I would say probably 60% of our readers hated us, but they read again and again and again, and they could try to dismiss us, but they knew we would do stories that would matter, ultimately. And like, the best example for me, people hated me for many reasons, but they would always read my food reviews, and they would always read Ask a Mexican, even if they hated it. So you have to give people stories that matter, but when you're giving stories like, 10 great pizzas, but you did that list last year, so why should I read this one this year? That's where people get jaded, when you have nothing to read, period.
But I do think that, there is a desire, hopefully, for narrative-free news. I mean, I think you're seeing that mostly among millennials and also Gen Z, who are kind of like, I don't want your narrative in my news. And I think that a lot of newspapers have evolved to where narrative is part of the story. And that's why you get so much criticism and anger from people on both sides of the aisle who don't want it. They're just like, can you just give me the facts and let me offer my own assumptions about them, please? And there's not a lot of media outlets that are doing that.
But how do you draw that line between that and just lazy reporting? He said, she said, because I think most people they may say
Yeah.
They don't want they don't want your viewpoint in it, and they mean viewpoint, but they want your insights. They want you to be able to explain, this is why you just heard, you may have watched this person say all this stuff on the floor of the Senate, but that's not really what it's all about. Here's what's really going on, and they want that.
I think that what people want, if you were to lay it out, they would want, like at the top of the story, like here are the facts. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Done, that's it, in its own little box. So if you just want to know what actually happened, you know, and then you say analysis, and then you offer the analysis of what, the voices, the color, all that other stuff. But I think if you have just the information, just the facts to start, that would help show people that, like, wait, we're just providing you this, and we're clearly telling you, now I'm going to give you kind of an inside story or inside take, and that might help.
Wonky people want that. People want a story. People want a yarn. That's what people want, yarns. We have been telling stories since we were in caves, painting on them. That's what people want. And the problem with a lot of reporting historically, especially with the dailies, they just got so dry, your eyes peel out. Like, it's just dumb journalism.
And I see you nodding there. You agree with
Well,
that?
I just think it's, to me, there are niche products that you have a lot more success, whether it's the weeklies. I think the Daily Pilot in its heyday, when everybody picked it up to see their kid in there, and now you have it. I mean, it runs as a fly sheet some days, and there's nothing left to it. And so I think, here's what people get. So if you get the Pilot now, you get a fly sheet on Wednesday. It's not published Monday. It's not published Tuesday. You get a fly sheet on Wednesday. You get a fly sheet
What's
on
a fly? Just
it's
for
just 4 pages.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Then they have their product on Friday and Saturday and Sunday that's a little bit bigger, but they just don't have the advertising support, and so their option is, well, let's increase our territory, but to me that's the wrong move to make. Because what people want is they want that local stuff. That's what a Pilot gives them versus an LA Times.
Probably the reason they're doing it is because they see an opening, because the Register is nowhere, the Times is nowhere. So, and I agree with you. I don't think that's smart, because the Daily Pilot has always been known Costa Mesa, Newport Beach. I would probably concede Huntington Beach, but then Irvine, there's no connect. Fountain Valley, vaguely, but it's like, concentrate on what you've done all these years. And that's where you find your success.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes, these different media companies are trying to do more rather than less, and I think that focus sometimes, you knew when you were at the OC Weekly, you knew when you picked up the weekly what you were going to get inside. You knew it, and that was a good thing because you can anticipate it. Nowadays, I think there's so many products out there you can't anticipate what you're going to find inside of them.
With the rise of the internet, are people still getting the news they need, but just in different ways, or as newspapers decline, is something more than just ink and paper being lost? Also, what might a future Orange County news operation look like? In other words, I think it's good that there's online. We don't need to cut down, maybe the old model of cutting down trees and having big ad staffs to support this, little group of journalists in a capsule, that you're sending off with the big rocket behind it or wherever, just isn't the way it works anymore. And it doesn't have to be that way. But are we losing something in this shift, let's say, from a more traditional journalism to a new online
resources? I mean, those places had a lot of money. They had big budgets. They could hire hundreds of reporters. Now, when you have 2 or 3 people, and that's good. I've always said it's better to be lean and mean than fat and do nothing with it. But still a lot of resources, because now the stories that most of these places are going to do is fast. You can't spend months on a big project that not even so much about winning awards, but bringing people down. Like the Register, I remember every year they would have their big, huge project, and there would be some good ones. Too much lead in Mexican candies, or the UCI fertility scandal. You can't do those when you have a staff of 3 people over 2 weeks.
So you lose, to your question, you lose investigative journalism, because and most newspapers are losing that anyway, because it's the most expensive thing. Because you could have someone on an investigative story for a year or 2, and that's all they've done for that year or 2. But then they win a Pulitzer for the UCI fertility scandal, right? What you end up gaining is you get people with interesting perspectives. You get citizen journalism from these columnists who aren't being paid, it sounds like, in different sectors of the community. But there is a trade-off there, right? You don't get the investigative, and you don't get you don't get the understanding of the traditional values and ethics of journalism, so it takes an editor or a publisher to step in and provide those. But I do think that everyone's moving in that direction, partially because I do think, and I bring this up in almost every meeting I have now with advertisers or potential advertisers, that like the local communities, whether it's through a nonprofit model to support these papers, but also the business community has to step up and say, okay, maybe it's not the same ROI we're getting from Facebook or Google advertisements or whatever it is, but we have a duty to support these organizations, because what I find oftentimes is that people with large companies with lots of money that are doing super well will call all the time for stories or editorial, or they want a feature, but they don't support that local paper at all, and they expect that they're still going to get covered or get their things promoted. And there's a disconnect, which is like, if this isn't supported economically by the big businesses in the community and small businesses in the community, how do you expect it to survive, to actually do the things you need it to do?
Well, you know what? I think one of the ways to get back again to what we were talking about a little earlier, the patrons of journalism or the nonprofit model, that's how the companies, I don't think you're going to get many companies that you're going to be persuading them that, you know, this is a virtuous or maybe even a self-interested enterprise that you should invest in. They'll do it when they see, oh, the community likes this. And so now I, being a bank, you know, or whatever, I'll sponsor this. Sure. I'll become a sponsor of this organization just as I would, you know, sponsor the annual theater dinner or whatever, or the YMCA, you know, because this is good for the community and I'll be a leading citizen. And I think that's where the nonprofit model has some hope. That,
and it's working
you know,
in other parts of the country. I think it's too soon. I mean, the case studies aren't long enough to say whether it's sustainable, but it is working in other parts of the country. But again, no one has tried it in as big of a media market as the LA DMA, and Orange County is under the LA marketing area. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if a larger publication decided to do that. Yeah,
Tom, as somebody who's made that transition from the print to the virtual, you know, is it possible that, you know, let's say we set up the Orange County, you know, nonprofit news bureau or whatever, and that it's going to be that, will it be a print publication? Is it possible that it won't be a print? Can you do everything a newspaper does without having it in someone's hand?
Oh yeah, I think you could put plenty of information out there. It's just how it's packaged. No, I think that's one of the problems they have. By the time they throw it on the doorstep, it's old, and it's unless it's a feature publication, more of a feature
like a magazine,
publication.
yeah.
And so that's one of the things you're battling in today's world. Just the timing of everything.
And the people buying it, increasingly, their whole game plan is, how do we squeeze a little more profit out of it, and it always comes from cutting. And that's why some of the criticism of the, whether it's the private equity guys that own, you know, the Register or anyone else, I see them as the symptom, not the problem. They didn't come in, they didn't start out and say, let's destroy the newspaper business. It's like, oh, here's an opportunity. Nobody else is investing in this, you know, money-losing or shrinking operation, but we know how we can do it. So this is what you get when you're in a dying industry. You get these vultures coming in who are, now I know Gustavo would disagree because he says, you know, he could have saved OC Weekly, but anyway, you know, that's what you get. And so maybe if you go online and you figure out a way to generate just enough revenue that if you tie it to a nonprofit or the sugar daddy, you can survive.
I had a conversation with Sam Zell after he bought the.
You did?
Yeah, so he
Sam
flew in.
Zell, the real estate guy who many years ago had a rather unpleasant experience with Chicago Tribune.
So he landed in the parking lot, Times Orange County, came into my office. He was taking a tour after he purchased it, came into my office, and here's what we talked about. We talked about the commission structure of the Daily Pilot and how I paid my salespeople almost nothing, but they could make tons of commission. And I had easily multiple salespeople making 6 digits a year at the Daily Pilot. Okay.
While you had 0 reporters making 6 digits.
Absolutely.
Of course.
But my point was, is he said, and he made this comment later in front of all the LA Times. He said, I finally found a place that's paying the salespeople the right way in this company. I've traveled all over. And the problem you have in these kind of companies, and these bigger companies come in, is you hire all these salespeople at the register at times, you pay them big salaries, and they get little bonuses. Where in my estimation of the way you get people excited is you can pay them, you pay them enough so they can get by in life, but you give them a heck of an opportunity to make a lot of money. And that seemed to be the thing that really worked at the pilot. And
that's how it was at OC Weekly too.
yeah, and you get aggressive people. And when I've seen these other organizations, whether it's the Times or the Register or whatever, they sometimes set up their sales organization. So if you're not going to hit your bonus that month, you might as well wait till next month when you can hit it, because you'll make more money that way. It's weird stuff.
Yeah.
I always just figured, let's incentivize the heck out of them and try to make a lot of money.
Make people believe.
But I wondered if that even works nowadays with the online model. That's all I
look at BuzzFeed, look at Visor, success stories. Those are a more national scale. It also all depends. Like, why are you doing this? Like, if you're getting journalism to become a millionaire, you're a fool. Like that era is long gone, and frankly, that era should have never happened in the first place. Journalism, again, coming from the alt weekly world, I really do believe that journalism should be muckrakers. We used to be, the classic cliche, ink-stained wretches. I'm perfectly fine being an ink-stained wretch. Anyone who's trying to be professional.
And the Chinese wall, journalism here, advertising here. In fact, bite the hand that feeds you
exactly,
as
much as possible, because that's what's going to make people read. Great stories are going to make people read. No, we would always say this to the sales staff. I'm glad you guys are selling the heart of our paper, but no one reads OC Weekly for the ads. Well, maybe in the back, but that's about it. Back in the days.
I think newspapers newspapers used to be a business, even though they had to tolerate the Bolsheviks like yourself in the newsroom. They were a business. I think where it's going now is they're going to have to become a non-profit business. I think that's the future. I saw it. Tom Nod
versus no profit.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think, Brian? You're running you're a profit guy. You think it's still?
Well, it's funny because I was listening to your story about calling people vultures and people who come in, they want to cut and make a profit. There are some that do that. Not all are doing that. And for us, like to your point, if I wanted to become a millionaire, I wouldn't have done it by buying the LA Weekly. But that was the accusation, right? We're coming in and we're cutting everything, and you're gonna make all this money off of it. And that wasn't the case. The cuts that were made were necessary just to get to a sustainable level, to buy enough time to try to create something that was long-term sustainable. I don't think that I'm not opposed to the nonprofit model. I actually think that if tested and done properly, and I've raised a lot of money and been involved with a lot of charities, so I totally get how it works. I think it can be done. I think a place like Orange County is a perfect place to do it because you don't really have your own media market, and the Register and the Weekly and the Business Journal are really all we have that are just or you guys have now because I don't live here anymore, but are Orange County specific. And so I think that there is an opportunity for that. I also think there's probably a hybrid model of nonprofit and for-profit. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I do think that there's a role for nonprofit journalism bureaus. I've been involved in some of those as well, but I think you have to do it correctly, and you have to set expectations for the donorship group to let them know that this isn't buying into having a carrot or a stick for what you want in a community, that it is just a donation to support something that is crucial to local growth and prosperity and transparency. And I think that it can be done. I'd like to see more of it done. And who knows where a lot of these papers end up. It could be a hybrid model. It could just be a straight nonprofit model.
Right.
We wrap up with more about LA Weekly and why Brian Calle's team of mostly Orange County investors want to own Los Angeles's alternative newspaper.
What is it that you think you can do that will make LA Weekly a financial success?
I think there's a lot of things that we could do. I think that not speaking ill of anyone who had been involved with the LA Weekly for a long time and for many years, I think that there's an opportunity to refocus on the places where people actually want the LA Weekly covering. If you look at the data from our website and the interest in particular stories, it's very clear why people come to the LA Weekly. They come to the LA Weekly because they want to know about what's going on in LA, what to do in LA, what the cuisine trends are, what's happening culturally in LA, what's happening in the art community in LA, what's happening in the music community in LA. And I think that if you refocus efforts on those particular verticals, that those communities will come in to support the LA Weekly. I also think that the LA Weekly had operated as a really cool print product for a really long time, but it never fully morphed into a digital platform that, oh, by the way, has a cool print product. And I think that that transition could be very, very powerful for the sustainability of the LA Weekly. And the reality, the good thing that I have with my investor group, and I've said this and people don't believe me and I don't care, but it's gonna, how it ends will be proved to myself, is like the investment group, the guys who are involved, not including myself, are very, very wealthy people. And they didn't get in it to make gazillions of dollars off the LA Weekly. They got into it because they're interested in the LA Weekly. And however we end up, the goal really is to be sustainable. If we can figure out a really cool and profitable model that's duplicative throughout the country, that's a huge win, and no one's gonna scoff at that. But if it turns out that, okay, we need to turn this into a community nonprofit because that's the best way to keep it sustainable, I will go to them and tell them that is what we need to do. And so for me, my attitude is get it to where it is now, where it's sustainable and you're not worrying about all sorts of things coming at you, whether it's outside criticism or whether it's the economics of the business and having too many expenses and not enough revenue. Now we're at a point where we don't have to necessarily worry about that, and now we can start thinking creatively about how we can innovate. Some of the innovations might be amazing and work, some of them might fail, but we will know in due time, very quickly probably, what the right trajectory for keeping the LA Weekly around for the next 10 years is.
One thing you didn't mention was, I thought part of what really started Village Voice and all that was that you're the alternative. You've got this voice, you're covering stories, you're doing muckraking, you're doing that kind of thing. That's what weeklies kind of, speaking truth to power, if you will. Is there still a role?
Oh, 100%. Are we doing as much of it that was done in the heyday? Most certainly not. Do I hope that we will? Yeah. Do I think it's fun when we offend people? Absolutely. That's part of the job. I'm not as much as you like offending people, but I enjoy it a little bit.
Spitting.
But at the same time, I think that's and that's the reason that we still have the readership that we have.
I thought that I heard in one of the interviews, either with Gustavo or with Daniel Hernandez, that you got kind of your back up a little, and I think you suggested that the LA Weekly, before you took over, had kind of maybe lost, it was starting to play favorites. It was becoming a little too institutionalized in who, in what vested interests they were writing about.
I said, so one of the things, and I hate that I'm actually going to admit this sitting next to this man, but one of the things that the OC Weekly did so well was it was the watchdog of establishment media. So the OC Weekly would take the OC Business Journal to task, would take our editorial page to task, would take you to task, would take the Register newsroom to task, right? And it was frustrating, and people in the building would like swear your name and probably make memes about you and didn't like it. But the vast majority of it was very, very necessary and accurate. And it was funny because people in the building would be like, how did you get this information? How is he getting this information, right? Or how,
it's
not
all
just
from
you.
them.
Exactly. and people were like, what is going on, right? I felt as though the LA Weekly had become part of the establishment media in Los Angeles, and no one was providing that type of watchdog role against the other media outlets in LA.
Do you think that's
No,
a fair?
absolutely not. Dennis Romero was a hell. I mean, he took on Hollywood for years, way before it became cool to go on Hollywood and diversity. Dennis Romero would just destroy everyone.
But that's not like
and
your
all that.
colleagues in journalism, though. I agree with that, but he didn't go after the LA Times very often.
At that point, what is there to go against the Times? I mean, at that point, now
Really?
things are.
I could name some things.
No, things are changing now, but at that point, for a long time. I mean, because here's the thing: the problem with LA Weekly historically, in terms of covering the establishment, that is such a huge area. Who is the establishment? Who do you pick to be the establishment? They would always do a great job of doing investigative stories, and this is the other thing with LA Weekly. People talk trash on LA Weekly now. The former people of LA Weekly talk trash on this last generation, the ones that he fired. And before that, it's a wound that never heals for LA Weekly. Go talk to Mark Cooper about how he felt about LA Weekly once the New Times, people who bought us, was. Like, it's always trash talking, always trash talking, always trash talking. The one thing I'd say right now about LA Weekly, I like what Lena's doing, I like what Derek's doing, I like all the cultural coverage. There's no news. There is no news. Where is the news? That's what people want to know. If you're going to take on the establishment, you need muckrakers. And when you're doing stories about culture, that's not really muckraking. You need hard news.
Okay.
And I would completely agree with that. And that's why I told you in the interview that one of the one thing I would do differently is I would have made sure that we hired Dennis, because he was a constant writer of news issues on a daily basis. And when I mentioned the hybrid model of nonprofit and for-profit for some of these organizations, I think that some of the hard-hitting investigative pieces are going to have to be done through a nonprofit that gives its content freely to any newspaper that wants
ProPublica
it.
Center for Investigative Reporting,
And that's something
and it's
I'm
working
working
for
on.
them.
And we all agree we need more hard news, right? So we're all agreed on that. All right, okay, gentlemen, thank you. We did a whole second show.
I know,
here.
seriously.
So anyway,
We are.
okay,
I know.
thanks a lot.
I'm hungry.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's it for now. Thanks again to my guests, Brian Calle, Gustavo Arellano, and Tom Johnson. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.